From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. As we now enter into the second month of dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and the resulting near collapse of the U.S. and world economies, where do we stand? And how is what's happening impacting our government, our politics, and the upcoming elections? Middle Tennessee State University Dr. John Weil is our guest on Inside Politics this week to discuss those topics. Dr. Weil, welcome back to the program.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, as we're trying to figure out where we are right now, we now have all these sort of models that are coming out. The models last week were very bad, with 100,000 to 240,000 deaths coming. Now they're much lower. There's a new one from Vanderbilt that has a different peak, a different amount of hospitalizations. Do you find those things helpful or confusing?
You know, I think the first one that came out was really shocking, and I don't know that it was purposely tilted in a direction, but I think there was a feeling that the president wasn't quite taking this seriously enough, and it really got his attention. Part of it, of course, is the models cannot predict necessarily how we're going to react. And, you know, the best explanation for why the models seem so high in comparison to where we think we're going to be is that they call it social distancing, I prefer to say, but the physical distancing really does seem to be helping. Part of the initial problem that we also had is I don't have much confidence, and I don't think our government does, in a lot of the figures that we got out of China. My suspicion is, I think they reported maybe 30,000 deaths. I suspect that there were much more than that. And, you know, we know that's Spain right now. They're saying that a lot of people that have died, if they died, but you know, that like us, they didn't have enough tests, and if they died without the tests, then they classify it as pneumonia or something else. So it's hard to have a model unless you know actually how many people had the disease and then what percentage of them died.
We're also looking at this particular situation where now that we're sort of beginning to see the peaks there, and maybe the virus will slowly ease, we still need to continue to practice all the social distancing requirements. But in doing that, we look towards reopening the economy. When is that likely to happen? Sometime next month, this summer, this fall, or really nobody knows?
Well, it'll probably vary from area to area. You mentioned the study that Vanderbilt had put out, I believe, just this morning. And if I recall correctly, they're sort of, you know, if we keep the distancing, there's a chance that it could peak in mid-May, but if we don't, we could go another month before we got, you know, to the plateau there. So there's still a lot of, you know, ambiguity. Right. What does Yogi Berra say? It's really hard to make predictions, particularly about the future.
If we're going to continue to do this reopening and we do it on a staggered basis, how politically difficult is that going to be? Everybody's going to want to open up their part of the country first.
Well, you're not going, you know, if you're a governor and you open up your part too soon and a lot of people die from it, you could end up getting the blame. So it's one of those things, you know, you could make a bad choice either way. And I think one of the frustrations of the president is, you know, the president likes to be a cheerleader and he likes to assure us that everything is fine. But, you know, were we to have gone with what he now says was an aspiration, you know, were we to open everything up after Easter Sunday, we would certainly exacerbate the situation that we're in. Whether the end of this month is realistic, it may be in some areas of the country. You know, California seems to have a very good handle on this right now. But if you were to open up, you know, Michigan or, you know, Philadelphia looks like it's a hot spot. Louisiana is a hot spot. Some of these, I doubt, will be ready by May 1st, maybe not by June 1st.
Those of us who took history classes or civics or political science classes remember that there's always been a tension in this country about what the federal government should do versus what the state and local governments could do. It's been called the fight about federalism. We seem to have that a lot going on in this conflict over what we're going to do about the coronavirus. But Donald Trump's kind of flipped the script on that, hasn't he? I mean, the feds are usually presidents who want to take in more responsibilities and federalize and centralize things. And he wants to push a lot of this down to the states. about the protective gear, about testing and everything else. That is sort of a different twist on federalism.
It is. I think there's at least two things going on here. One is that Republicans, modern Republicans, have traditionally generally been more for state and local autonomy than they have for national presence. So it sort of fits in with that. But what you partly see here is a deflection of blame. If the president can blame Governor Cuomo or the governor of Michigan or somebody else, then maybe that gets him a bit off the hook.
The other big question as we look at this is, as we go forward to begin to go back to normal, probably is opening up these states. We're going to have a whole lot more testing. At least that's what the medical experts say. A lot more tracking of people who have been exposed, who else they've been involved with. But the federal government seems to be wanting to get out of the testing business and put it all on the states. The states say they're not ready. That looks like the next big fight to reopening the economy.
Well, and of course, the most recent reports seem to indicate that the government originally, federal government, stepped in and said, no, we want to develop these tests and retain many of the administrative barriers that they had. Now, there's two kinds of tests that are going on, and the one where we seem to be really at a disadvantage is, just getting enough out to knowing who has a virus or not. But one of the things that Dr. Fauci said this morning was that he thinks we're only a week away, if I recall correctly, from the antibody tests that would tell you which individuals have in fact had the disease, some of whom were, of course, asymptomatic. And if we had that test, I would assume that it would be at least safe for those people to go back. Maybe you could put those people in the front office where they would deal with others without a chance of transmitting the disease, and put others who don't have the immunity somewhere else.
Looking forward long term, President Trump said that when this is over, he hopes everybody just sort of forgets it ever happened. Now, that may help him in terms of his politics, but isn't that also part of the problem? Over time, we don't teach in the schools about what happened in the past with cholera outbreaks, typhus, about the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. About all those things. Do we need to teach those things in the future so people know they've happened in the past and what we need to do to keep it from happening again?
It's very interesting. As I was preparing for this, I went through some of the indices and read some of the articles over the past several months. And there was an article in International Affairs, if I recall correctly, that was published, no mention at all of the coronavirus. It was winter of 1919 and fall of 1919, winter of 2020, which probably means it was, maybe formulated several months earlier. And they were really concerned. It's like, and they gave sort of a shout out to George W. Bush, that he had really expanded, partly because of his initiative for AIDS, but he had expanded testing and, some of our responses. Obama apparently had sort of left it flat, and then in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, Trump was calling for cuts in these areas. And, it's an awful thought in some ways, but I had a discussion with my wife that when, there's always possible that we'll have a virus worse than this one. And who knows, but that this is providential in letting us know we got to be better prepared for whatever the next thing that comes down the pike is.
Dr. John Vital of Middle Tennessee State University is our guest. We'll be back to continue our conversation with him after this break.